as far as Philip and other Conservatives are concerned, black people and LGBT people, he cannot comprehend them being talented. He can't do it. He's living proof of this. He has said it. He views the hiring of these marginalised people as inherently suspicious, and that is f***ed up.
I don't even think you'd get cast as a straight middle-aged guy these days, if you was one of those.
David Tennant is currently filming Doctor Who. Hey folks, this is Mr. TARDIS, and I'm away this week. It's why there was no live stream. In fact, I'm actually recording this video late on the Sunday night. I'm flying out tomorrow for a TV job. But I wanted to cover this topic partly because I want to make sure that there's more videos on the channel to keep, the YouTube algorithm train going, but also because I think this is something we need to discuss as a fandom and get on top of. And also the BBC should be taking in some steps as well in the near future, because as you folks may know, we've had a new Doctor announced. We had Ncuti Gatwa as the 14th Doctor. Over the past 2-3 days, I've watched the first series of Sex Education. Man's an absolute star, is absolutely terrific and phenomenal in it. His arc in the second half of the series was wonderful to see unfold, and I can't wait to see what he does in Series 2 and Series 3. We also had the casting of Yasmin Finney from Heartstopper. I've not seen Heartstopper, that will be next after Sex Education, but we already know that she's on location. She's been spotted on location filming with David Tennant, with Catherine Tate, with Bernard Cribbins, doing stuff in Camden in London for the 60th anniversary specials or something around that. However, predictably, with the casting of Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney, we have a person of colour, and we also have a trans woman of colour. Obviously, Conservatives are fucking livid right now. And I wanted to talk about this today, not just to dunk on Conservatives and racists, but because the tactic they've been employing regarding media is so transparent and obvious, and so on the face of it bigoted, flagrantly out in the open, that I think it needs talking about, and as a fandom, we need to be braced for it. Because I don't think we were when Jodie Whittaker was cast, when that announcement was made in the summer of 2017. I still don't think we are now, and I think as a fandom, if we want to stop it from getting any more toxic and from getting any more fractured and divided, we need to be able to identify the root of the problem. And the way we're going to do that is by dunking on stupid Conservatives. We've got a clip here from GB News. For those of you who don't know, GB News is a fake news outlet in the UK. It's meant to be a whole patriotic, wonderful UK talent, UK-based stuff. However, it does find most of its funding coming from America and Dubai, so whoops. We've got this segment here, hosted by Michelle Dewberry. The title of the video, Doctor Who trans actor will, quote, always be seen as a box-ticking exercise. Now, I'm not going to watch this shorter version. I'm going to watch the segment from the full Jubes & Co segment from GB News from Tuesday the 17th of May, because the actual shorter clip gets rid of the beginning, gets rid of the outro, and I wanted to include that for full context for this video. So in this panel, Michelle Dewberry is joined, the first person to speak is political commentator Joe Phillips, the second is cultural historian Dr. Philip Kisley, and the third one is author and journalist Peter Hitchkins. Now, I did watch this full hour-long segment, and believe it or not, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, because, believe it or not, they had a pretty good panel. Joe Phillips and Peter Hitchkins had some really good conversations and dialogue and back and forth, frequently interrupted by Michelle and Philip being wrong about practically everything ever in that entire hour. It was almost admirable. But let's see them talk about the casting of Yasmin Finney in Doctor Who, and to a lesser extent, Ncuti Gatwa.
Doctor Who, do you care about Doctor Who? Do you watch it? I neither care about it nor watch it. However, I couldn't help but notice today that when announcing their new series, we learned, didn't we, the other day, that the Doctor Who, the current actor, he's gay, he's black, the new sidekick...
Just to clarify as well, Ncuti Gatwa has not publicly confirmed or talked about his sexuality. He plays a gay character in Sex Education, but, straight actors have been known to play gay roles and vice versa. So, as far as I'm concerned, until he starts talking about it publicly, it's none of our business, and I think it's really rude and quite telling as well to kind of assume this of him, especially in the context of this conversation. The only reason they're taking an issue with him being gay is because he's cast in a TV show. That's the only issue they have in this particular context, and it shows.
Rose is a transgender actress, and I've got to say, I'm really sorry to be so blunt, but I find it all a little bit weird. I'm really into talent, and you get your job based on your kind of abilities and all the rest of it. But it's getting to the point now where I can't help but notice and ponder, are we focusing more on diversity and box ticking these days over talent, Jo?
No, both these people are experienced actors, but you might as well say that having Rose Ayling-Ellis do Jackanory, the deaf actor, who came, who won Strictly Come Dancing, you might as well say that's a tick box exercise, and it's not. I mean, it's absolutely fine. I don't watch Doctor Who either, but I mean, it's great that a deaf actor is going to do Jackanory in sign language, isn't it?
So you think...
So Jo is absolutely on the money here, based Jo Phillips here, because she's absolutely right to the idea as well, bringing a deaf actress into the role as well would be seen by conservatives, shall we say. She says people, but she means conservatives, as a box tick, because diversity is an all-encompassing topic. Like when I do freelance work at the BBC and I fill in a form for their record keeping as to who I am, there's so many things on there, including whether or not my parents went to public school or a private school, whether I went to a public or private school, the profession of my parents, my religion, whether or not I'm disabled, what region of the country I live in. Diversity is a massive, all-encompassing topic, and it's always so telling when conservatives try and hone it down specifically to gender, race, sexual orientation. Sometimes they will say disabled people cannot be on TV, but that's a topic for another time. It just says a lot about people, where they draw the lines on where diversity begins and ends as a topic. That's all I'll say about that.
I think this is all nothing to see here, folks. Move along.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Philip, this is your bag, isn't it? It's your speciality.
It is my bag, but alas, I don't watch Doctor Who
You've got to be
either.
super quick. Get your bag out quickly.
I do think it's a box-ticking exercise. The difficulty with it is even if these actors are brilliant, which I'm sure they am, they'll always be seen as a box-ticking... they'll always be seen as a box-ticking exercise.
And that's the problem. He says, like, Philip here is saying the quiet part out loud. It does not matter if Yasmin Finney and Ncuti Gatwa are talented. It does not matter that Ncuti Gatwa was literally announced on the day that he received his BAFTA nomination for the 3rd year in a row for the same role for Sex Education. It does not matter to conservatives like Philip. You can be super talented, you can be a huge name, a rising star, an up-and-comer like Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney. As far as Philip and other conservatives are concerned, black people and LGBT people, he cannot comprehend them being talented. He can't do it. He's living proof of this. He has said it. He's gone onto GB News, which sadly is a UK broadcaster, and has said the quiet part out loud. It does not matter how talented you are. You will always be seen as a box tick. The fact that he just so flagrantly, openly came out to say this is mind-boggling. This guy, Philip Kisley, is a lecturer in performance and cultural histories at the University of Leeds, and he does not think that black and or LGBT people can actually get anywhere based on merit, without some sort of behind-the-scenes systems and schemes propping up these marginalised groups. He views the hiring of these marginalised people as inherently suspicious, and that is fucked up.
And it's also social engineering with children, and that's the thing that I'm really concerned about.
And he's genuinely, in the year of our Lord 2022, going on TV and saying, think of the children. And remember what's motivated this discussion. Ncuti Gatwa, Yasmin Finney, a black man and a black trans woman being on TV. And he's here proclaiming, think of the children, social conditioning. What? People of different backgrounds being on TV? Are you high? People often say to me, Mr. TARDIS, you can't just call people racist, but you've just had somebody on TV out loud and in front of grown-ups say, think of the children if black people and LGBT people are on TV, and has also said that he genuinely does not think that they can get by on merit. What else am I supposed to say? And this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this video. In some of my more recent response videos, people have genuinely said to me, Will, Mr. TARDIS, you responding to racists is just as bad as the racists themselves. You're antagonising, you're starting conflict. But firstly, I'm just responding to what they give me. Like, this is one reason I think that many people who I've talked about don't actually respond to me in turn, because I'm just taking what they say and extrapolating it for an audience. They they have to justify the things that they say, and they clearly don't want to do that. But I also fundamentally reject somebody like Philip Kisley going on TV and saying, think of the children, won't somebody get rid of all those black and trans people on screen? And me saying, that's fucked. I don't think those two equate. And personally, I think that a lot of that comes from naivete on the audience's part. People who are conflict averse and really just want to make sure that everybody gets along to an extent. But when you have GB News, which is a conservative outlet funded by conservatives, hosted by conservatives, to be consumed by conservatives, and this is the party line, I don't know what else I can tell you. Around 30% of the UK population are conservative voters, and they are either okay with this or they actively support this. And as far as I'm concerned, practically, there's really no difference no matter what they might tell themselves, because whether you do it or enable it, it still happens. And not to mention the unspeakable irony of conservative Philip Kisley trying to preach think of the children while simultaneously supporting a political party where the MP for Wakefield had recently been found guilty for sexually assaulting a minor. Philip does not give a shit about children. He just does not want to see black people and trans people on screen. When I did my initial video responding to the comments of the YouTube video when Jodie Whittaker was announced back in 2017, you had genuinely unhinged individuals who thought that Jodie Whittaker, a woman temporarily being in a TV show for 4 to 5 years, a temporary change to Doctor Who, was the end of civilization. Some people are saying that they should bomb the BBC. Some people genuinely thinking that having a woman on TV for a couple of years was an act of deliberate and active harm to men. And because, as a culture, we haven't done anything to combat that, now you get trans actors like Yasmin Finney, you get black actors like Ncuti Gatwa. They are now in the firing line. Anyway, let's carry on the video.
Peter?
Well, I hope they are brilliant, because I actually am so old that I watched the first appearance of the Daleks on a flickery black and white television screen. And I was so thrilled and terrified by it, and nothing that I've seen on Doctor Who ever since has remotely approximated to that. If they can get that old magic back, I don't care who they are. If they can't, I'm afraid it's too bad.
So Peter here, unironically, being the most based of the lot, where he just says, you know what, the show hasn't been good since 1963. You've got Woke, which is everything after 2005 was bad. You've got Broke, which is everything after Tom Baker was bad. And you've got Peter here being bespoke. Everything after 1963 is a complete waste. I don't agree, but I respect the position. And Michelle Dewberry rounds out the conversation.
Well, there you go. That's the panel's thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. I find it all a little bit peculiar, if you ask me. I find it just a desperate attempt to try and tick boxes and say, look, we're doing this. We've got a gay person, I almost said a straight person, but that would be hilarious, wouldn't it? Because try being a straight, middle-aged kind of guy these days. I don't even think you'd get cast as a straight, middle-aged guy these days if you was one of those.
David Tennant is currently filming Doctor Who. It's so predictable. These people are not based in any sort of reality. It's victim complexes, and Michelle Dewberry, she's working for GB News. She's actively paid to be wrong. Philip Kisley has absolutely no excuse, like he's just a guest here, but her saying, I find it a bit peculiar, it's all about ticking boxes, like there's no evidence that Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney are here just because of box ticking. Like, there's none here. Like, Russell T Davies has said that Ncuti Gatwa was the last person to audition and blew them away in the audition and was incredible, and we've seen him in Sex Education and he's incredible there. Before he was cast as the 14th Doctor, he's in that new big Barbie film with Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. No idea if it will be any good, but you know, it's a massive project, it's a massive film. But we know what Michelle Dewberry is talking about here. She just does not want to see trans people on screen, LGBT people generally. She does not want to see black people on screen either. It's obvious, she has nothing, but she has to coat the language in. I find it a bit peculiar, really. I think it's all the box ticking. Never mind the fact that fucking Philip already gave the game away. Michelle, you can't coat this in euphemism when your co-host killed the euphemism. You always see this rhetoric about the woke BBC, the box ticking at the BBC, they're forcing diversity in the BBC. Firstly, I find it really funny how an organisation whose internal policy is that its staff members cannot attend gay pride parades somehow earned a reputation of being super woke and super leftist, and never mind recent articles coming out about disgruntled black employees, particularly in the news division and the current affairs division, facing discrimination in the workplace and leaving to progress their careers elsewhere. Never mind that. But here's a fact for you. In 2020, Ofcom did a study breaking down the diversity both on-screen and off-screen of the 5 major big UK broadcasters. Now, the big 5 are the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Sky and Viacom. And with that little fact, you now know more about the UK TV industry than Nadine Dorries does. Out of the big 5, when ranked in terms of ethnicity behind the scenes and on camera, do you want to know who ranked the lowest in terms of on-screen and off-screen diversity out of that 5? ITV. In 4th place, it was the BBC, with 12%. 88% of BBC staff on-screen and off-screen are white, 12% are not. And yet you'll still have outlets like GB News and Talk TV and Conservatives Online touting it as some sort of massive progressive outlet that is forcing white people out of it. Incidentally, the #1 broadcaster from that top 5 in terms of diversity, Channel 4, with 20% of the staff on-screen and off-screen being non-white. Blimey, I think we found another reason why Conservatives want to get rid of Channel 4 so much. But let's take a look at another GB News segment, Has Doctor Who Gone Too Woke?, hosted here by Dan Wootton, a man who I am absolutely convinced at this point gets some sort of weird sexual kick out of being wrong about absolutely everything all of the time, regardless of topic. He hosted a segment called The Clash with a pretty interesting panel. Let's take a look.
Now, the Doctor, the lead character in the Doctor Who series, is a time-travelling alien who is not bound by the physical world. Yet the BBC, intent on bringing it all down to identity politics. This week, it was revealed that transgender actress Yasmin Finney will join the show as the Doctor's new companion, hot on the heels of their announcement that actor Ncuti Gatwa will become the first black lead of the show. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for the best person getting the part, and apparently Gatwa was dazzling in his audition, but it just feels a bit like the BBC will not make a casting call these days without some sort of agenda behind it. For the past...
Remember, the agenda in question is black people existing and LGBT people existing as well. That's the agenda. That's it. It's not a big mystery. That's the agenda that he's talking about.
5 years or so, the identity of the Doctor has dominated commentary of the show, and it ramped up when Peter Capaldi announced he was stepping down as the Doctor in 2017. The mainstream media insisted that his replacement can and must be a woman, black or both, and said that producers had an urgent choice to avoid casting another white man. Cue Jodie Whittaker being cast as the first ever female Doctor. And
it's so broad, the language, the mainstream media, not citing a single example, not citing a single quote or a specific, just alluding to a really nebulous and vague mainstream media, without any sort of thing. It just seems like Dan is absolutely fighting ghosts here. Now, there's always been a push to sort of diversify the role of the Doctor since the 1980s. I even showed that clip of John Nathan Turner on Nationwide when he said that, yeah, the Doctor can become a woman. It's not going to happen next time, but absolutely can happen. Yeah, there's been a push to this in the 1980s. How was it only recently gone woke then? It's like Dan knows nothing. Objectively, you could knock on his head, it's hollow. There's no brain in that skull. Not to mention that the BBC just gave Chris Chibnall carte blanche when it came to casting the Doctor. Chris Chibnall wanted a woman in the lead role, auditioned many people. Jodie Whittaker came out on top. There we go, the creative process works. That was Chris Chibnall's creative vision. It was his free speech, but Dan doesn't like free speech, hates free speech. He hates creatives being able to create what they want to do. Anti-free speech Dan Wootton, so on brand.
It's not just the targeted hiring, raising eyebrows, the preachy storylines like the damage of microplastics on the planet have had viewers reaching for the remote.
He's talking about Praxeus with the microplastics. And firstly, the microplastics were a pretty small incidental detail in that story, a nice bit of texturing, I thought at least. Honestly, I thought that Praxeus, you could plop that into a John Pertwee era in the early 1970s with Barry Letts and Terrence Dicks, and it would just fit side by side with stories like The Green Death, like Monster of Peladon. Like, it's fine. Like, what's the issue? Doctor Who's always talked about these things.
Co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie Amankona, the political commentator Connor Tomlinson, and former Doctor Who star, the actor Peter Purves. So, Peter, look, you were in Doctor Who for 46 episodes on the BBC between 1965 and 1966, alongside the original Doctor, William Hartnell. What do you think of the show now?
Well, it's a very different show. Television was very young back in the 60s. It was not, the serial was half-an-hour episodes, cliffhanger at the end of each episode, and I liked it that way. Things move on. I think technology's got in the way of it an awful lot recently. And you were mentioning Jodie Whittaker causing quite a stir when she was cast. I don't know why. I think it was probably inevitable at some time. Because it's fiction, it's not real, for goodness sake. It's a fictional science fiction story. And so you can do anything you like. If you can regenerate the Doctor, you can regenerate him into anything. It could be absolutely anything. So I don't think it was a mistake to cast her. I waited till she performed, and I thought she was very good. And at that point, there's no more discussion. The acting was the important thing. And I think the same thing applies now. With the fact.
So we just saw this person in the middle here. This is Connor Tomlinson, a Conservative shill, rolling his eyes at the idea that casting a woman in the first place wasn't an issue. A little bit of a mask-off moment here. But yeah, unironically, based Peter Purves. I say that slightly ironically. I do know his political affiliation, and it's not exactly that progressive. He was at the Galaxy 4 BFI event, and he was very, very vocal about not wanting anyone to wear masks, even though we were wearing them partly for his protection. But obviously myself and Peter Purves aren't going to agree on everything, but he's kind of right on the money here. He likes his old-fashioned TV, and that's absolutely fine, and he doesn't see an issue with diverse casting as the Doctor. And you can see Dan kind of seething in his seat here. You got Peter Purves here and he's not going for the Conservative line? What? I know I said we wanted diversity of thought and free speech, but not like this.
With Anshuta Gatwa being cast, I don't see the problem. I'll wait till I see him. I've never heard of him, to be honest. So I'll wait and see what his performance is. If it's good, great. If it's not, I'd probably say so. But I mean, it won't be anything to do with his colour. I've been in this business a long time. I did my first professional acting job in 1957, and I've never considered gender, race, or colour absolutely ever to come in the way of what I'm watching.
And it shouldn't.
The acting is the importance.
But I guess the concern is...
Look at Dan try so hard to vomit out. No, colour, gender, doesn't matter. Like, this hurts for him to say. And you can tell, he's got such a bad poker face.
Does that come into consideration when the BBC is making its decisions? Connor Tomlinson.
This is why I said up top that the BBC is actually number 4 in the top 5 broadcasters in the UK when it comes to casting and diversity hiring. This is just a dogmatic viewpoint. He's got nothing. He has no statistics or stats or anything to back this up. Just a vibe. Just, he sees black people and trans people, LGBT people on screen, and he just feels a bit personally icky. And you know what, Dan? I don't think you should make your biases everybody else's problem.
Connor Tomlinson, you say Doctor Who has been ruined by what you describe as historical revisionism. What do you mean?
Well, I unfortunately disagree with Peter, all due respect. He's been an instrumental part of the series since its inception. Unfortunately, the Doctor Who writers, like Chris Chibnall, the showrunner, doesn't have the same respect for William Hartnell, the first Doctor. In The Timeless Children, the last episode of Series 12, they retconned that the Doctor had always secretly been a black woman and was actually the first Time Lord of all time, and we're going to go back and ruin the legacy of those people that came before. Also, when...
that past does not do anything to ruin the history of those actors. Yeah, obviously, I know he doesn't believe this, because it's frankly a stupid talking point. William Hartnell is, of course, the first Doctor. The idea of there being Doctors prior to William Hartnell has been bandied around in the series since the 1960s, and nobody complained back then. It's just dumb. It's a dumb talking point, and Connor is dumb for making it, and he knows he's dumb for making it, but he does not care because he's a Conservative shill.
Cast, Stephen Moffat blamed, quote, Brexit voters for why it took so long to cast a female actress, and said there must be 2 black co-stars in the TARDIS for progress. Actually,
So what Connor's just said there's two things to break down from that. Firstly, Stephen Moffat was using Brexit voters as shorthand for Conservatives, and he was absolutely right. Like, you are proving him right. Like, the fact that you were not ready for a woman to be on TV for a little bit for a few years is living testament to that. Connor, you are proving Stephen Moffat right here. Dan may scoff at the comment, but he is absolutely proving Stephen Moffat right here. In fact, 5 years on, you're still molting about it. It's like, you have no leg to stand on here. But secondly, that second part of the quote that Connor did there, saying that you need 2 black people in the TARDIS to maintain progress, I can find no record of Stephen Moffat ever saying that. Like, seriously, I Google Stephen Moffat co-stars progress, and there's nothing here. Like, I've gone through these links, and no, Connor appears to have just made this up. And isn't it really interesting how Connor makes up the quote about the 2 black people? Isn't that really fascinating? The Brexit comment was true, but Stephen Moffat was absolutely correct about it. But 2 black co-stars in the TARDIS for progress? Connor's made that up.
Actually, Stephen Moffat read a quote. In terms of historical revisionism, there's an amazing thing here I have to read at length. Quote, after he did the episode, it was the Frost Fair one in season 10, when there were a lot of black people attending the Frost Fair in Victorian England, something we wouldn't care about for colourblind casting in the future, but in the past it's just not true. He said, we've kind of got to tell a lie. We'll go back into history, and there will be black people where historically there wouldn't have been, and we won't dwell on that. We'll say, to hell with it. This is the imaginary, better version of the world. By believing in it, we'll summon it forth. I don't think the world gets better by telling lies. It's a shame that there was historical injustice and racism in the past, but we can't solve that in the present and out into the future by lying about what happened before.
Firstly, I will give you folks a moment to just recoil from the incredible irony of Connor saying that the world does not get better by lying, literally seconds after lying about a Stephen Moffat quote. But let's actually dive a bit deeper into that quote that Stephen Moffat gave that Connor has basically butchered. I did manage to find the source of the quote, it's from TV Guide, but Connor strangely omits this bit. History is always whitewashed, says Moffat. How do we manage to have a diverse cast despite that? The way that we did it was, say that you will see people of different colours there. In fact, there were. People didn't just arrive in the twinkle of an eye. It is bending history slightly, but in a progressive and useful way. Also, it wouldn't be a place for Bill, played by Pearl Mackie, Black Companion at the time during that season, in several respects. Taking that on is just respectful of the audience, really. It's a chance too, I'm always reluctant to sound so pious and so do-gooding and all that. It's useful that these things are talked about. The evil in Doctor Who can sometimes be the evil in our real world too. So what Stephen Moffat is saying here is absolutely correct. Like, people in the UK of different ethnicities didn't just spring out from holes in the ground suddenly overnight. They were brought here after the 16th century. And Thin Ice is set in the 19th century. Like, saying that there were no black people in Victorian London is just categorically untrue. Connor here is taking the Laurence Fox approach. He just hates seeing black people on screen. He sees them in a historical setting like Laurence Fox did for that Sikh soldier in the film 1917, and just assumed that they weren't there because that was a long time ago and black people weren't here a long time ago. Like, that's how they sound. Like, they know so little about history and culture and race that they just assume that black people just appeared in, what, the 1950s, the 1960s? Like, genuinely, where does Connor think they came from? But even playing devil's advocate, even if Connor was 100% right about the historical elements, and he isn't, by the by, like, he can have his opinion that Doctor Who should be 100% historically accurate, but where do you draw the line? Because it was not historically accurate in Thin Ice and the Frost Fairs that a blue box appeared with a Scottish person and saved the day. Like, you've got to draw a line somewhere. Why draw it at race? That's so arbitrary, and it says so much about Connor's thinking. But you can tell that Connor does not really believe this worldview. And I know that because if Winston Churchill appeared in Doctor Who again, and they acknowledged his racism, his colonialist viewpoints and imperialist perspectives and opinions, Connor would be fucking livid. But no, Doctor Who does sort of placate the legacy of Winston Churchill and has him instrumental in fighting off the Daleks in the 1940s. Like, Doctor Who is sci-fi fantasy, sci-fi historical, but I do think that a line does have to be drawn that, yeah, you know, this could be a kid's first exposure to Winston Churchill. You know, maybe there are some things that an older audience should maybe grapple with in terms of those themes. But if Doctor Who decided, no, the 14th Doctor is going to meet Winston Churchill and is going to call Churchill out on his racism, Connor would be livid. You cannot win with Conservatives because they don't care about the facts. They care about ideology. Connor only cares about ideology regardless of the facts, regardless of the historical context.
Albie Amankoni, you disagree?
Well, I think Connor's got a very vivid imagination. Look, all that happened this week was the BBC released a press release saying that two of the most successful actors, British actors, of the last 2 years in hit Netflix series Sex Education and Heartstopper have been cast in one of the United Kingdom's most loved television shows, Doctor Who. I completely agree with Peter. It's absolutely nothing to do with the fact that Ncuti is black. It's absolutely nothing to do with the fact that, Yasmin is...
Like, once again, Connor does... Like, he genuinely cannot conceive of a world where black people are talented. This is so cut and dry. He can't. You just saw that reaction just to the idea of Ncuti Gatwa being the 14th Doctor because he had a good audition. Like, that reaction's so telling.
Trans, it's just to do with the fact that they are good actors. They've had very good views on Netflix, and now the BBC wants to recreate that magic.
The issue...
Hey, notice how Dan Wootton has let Peter Purves speak at length, has let Connor speak at length, but immediately starts to interrupt the black guy.
What I have, Albie, is that...
And they've muted Peter's mic as well. Like, oh, we can't have dissent, this is GB News, can't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Their announcement wasn't about the fact that they were just great actors. It's the BBC who put such a focus on identity politics with every...
Did you read the press release, Dan?
Well, I did, and I saw all of the coverage around it, and it was made very, very clear, as Connor's just pointed out, by Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies, where they want to take the series. And it's also in terms of how these decisions...
Okay, now, not to steal Albie's thunder, he's going to get to this later, but let's nip this in the bud now. In this casting announcement for Ncuti Gatwa, race, ethnicity, the fact that he was born in Rwanda and his family moved to Scotland when he was 1 or 2 years old, is not mentioned anywhere at all in this press release. Yasmin Finney's race is not mentioned. The fact that she is trans is mentioned in her own interview portion of it. But yeah, this is the only sentence across these two press releases where identity is brought into the equation. But Dan here's like, oh, I've read it, and it's plastered all over. Like, he's lying, of course, and he is going to be called out by Albie in a minute. But yeah, he's lying. He knows he's lying. He's getting bent over something that he's not even read, or if he has read it, is incredibly comfortable just lying about on TV.
Decisions at these hirings are reported on too, because we saw it in the White House this week, Albie. You know,
see, he knows that he's wrong about the press statements, so he decides to deflect, like to pivot to a completely unrelated topic.
Is a new lesbian black press secretary,
and I thought that
all of the coverage and all of the rhetoric is around the fact that she's lesbian and black.
If you read the press release, it mentions nothing about the fact that Ncuti is the first black Doctor Who. It mentions nothing about the fact.
And Connor, like, cocks his eyebrows, like, is that true? Like, he doesn't know either. Connor would be terrible at poker. Like, he's so unable to hide his ignorance.
Peter Purves, you wanted to respond to what Connor Tomlinson had to say.
Well, yeah, I did agree with him to a certain extent, but basically what he's saying is the scripts weren't good enough. And as far as Jodie was concerned...
No, that's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying. He didn't say that at all. Like, Peter, I know you're trying to be nice here because you've been invited onto GB News, but that's not what he said.
When she was in the show, I think the thing that let her down most were the scripts. Yeah. I thought they were poor.
They were rubbish.
And it just didn't work. It wasn't.
Dan has not watched a single frame of Doctor Who in his entire fucking life.
It never drew me into it. I wasn't drawn into it. And I won't be drawn into the new series until I will see the first episode. I want to see what the actors are like. That's important. Having been in the show and going to conventions and various things around the place, it's important that I know who's in it and what they're doing. But I don't have to agree with it, and I don't have to like it, and I don't think the scripts have been good enough. I've got a sneaky feeling with Russell T Davies back in the driving seat, we might get scripts that might be a little bit...
Well, I hope see you shaking your head. Connor Tomlinson isn't the whole...
Okay, right, now listen. Peter has got the right perspective here, I think. I think he's holding himself quite well for the most part. But I honestly think when you brought on to a panel like this, like, has Doctor Who gone too woke because they've cast a black person and a trans person, and they have no cause or reason to believe it's diversity or box ticker or anything? If they did, they'd name a single example or a single source or anything. They have nothing, and they know they have nothing. I think the only way for someone like Peter, and also for somebody like Albie, to come onto a panel like this, is to just refute the asking of the question. Like, this question is, quite frankly, utterly ridiculous on the face of it. And it's been ridiculously handled by the Conservatives. You need to shut it down at the pass, at the inciting incident. You need to shoot it down before you can even give it 12 minutes of airtime like they have done on GB News. The question is fundamentally stupid.
The whole reason that the scripts were so bad is because there was a desperation to include all of these woke social issues.
Such as?
Rather than actually just thinking, what's a good story to tell?
Exactly. Jodie Whittaker's first season focused entirely, as we said before, on historical revisionism. They were all period dramas going back into the past, beating the British audience over the head about American racism or colonialism and how they were all implicated in the historical injustices of the past.
Oh, I loved it in the Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos, and the Ghost Monument, and the Saranga Conundrum, and Arachnids in the UK, and the Witchfinders, and Resolution, and the Woman Who Fell to Earth, and It Takes You Away. 2 episodes! 2 episodes out of 11 for the first series had that as a background detail. Like, what? It was a bit like when Mikey Smith and Kevin O'Sullivan did their bit on Doctor Who Back for Talk Radio a few years ago that I responded to. And Mikey was like, all of the villains in Doctor Who Series 11 were white men. When there's like, what, 3 or 4 across the whole 11 episodes? Like, white male villains were the minority in that series. What the hell? Because here we get to the heart of the problem. They don't actually care about the specifics. They just care that black people and LGBT people are getting representation in media. As far as these people are concerned, Dan, Connor, Conservatives in general, one person is too many on screen. Like, that's the line. One is too many. Dan and Connor, if I were to give them that 12% statistic from the BBC done by Ofcom in 2020, they would say that's still too high.
And now Russell T Davies, who got up on stage recently accepting an award for It's a Sin, saying the LGB Alliance was committing trans genocide by cutting out the T and killing, will not improve the amount of identity politics in these stories. And the reason, Peter, these stories are
He's right.
terrible is because they're going by the doctrine of representation. And Albie, I'm so glad you brought up protected characteristics, because this is why we have not got characters on screen. There was an academic who's in a lot of the BBC's, diversity training and all that. His name is Charles R. Lawrence, and he said, we must flood the marketplace with our stories to shape a new public discourse. That discourse is about systemic racism. He's a critical race theorist. Now what happens...
So he is going by the American school of conservatism, where critical race theorist is just someone who mentions racism one time. But once again, what Connor's done here, he seems to have not just made up a quote, he seems to have made up a person. Like, you Google Charles R. Lawrence BBC, and you don't get anything. Like, there's nothing... Where did this quote come from? Oddly enough, the most relevant person here when you Google Charles R. Lawrence BBC is Charles Lawrence in the TARDIS Doctor Who wiki, Charles Lawrence from Doctor Who and the Silurians. Now, in all seriousness, I'm assuming that he's referring to Charles R. Lawrence III, who's an author. However, if you search for the quote that Connor gave, you don't find anything. The top quote, you search for the word flood in this document, and it's just without opening the floodgates of censorship. Like, you don't find this quote. Connor is just making shit up again.
When you have people who have protected characteristics in stories, it would be racist, sexist, etc. for all the audience on Twitter that are going to complain at you and cancel you if you put them through some hardship. So they automatically become heroes without ever undergoing a hero's journey. Well,
this is, without any sort of specifics, this is absolute nonsense. But remember, we've also talked about this before in previous response videos. Conservatives cannot handle white men on TV being depicted as anything other than absolutely perfect patron saints with absolutely no flaws. Ironically, these people complain about Mary Sues in media, but if you get anything other than a Gary Stu in fiction, then they can't hack it, they can't handle it.
And if your identity membership means that you're a hero by de facto of being black, not straight, a woman, then what does that make the villains? It makes them automatically straight, white and male. So I don't want to watch a show that says I am no better than a Dalek because of how I was born.
Connor, people don't think that you're like the Daleks because you're a straight white male. People think you're like the Daleks because you fucking hate black people. Do you think Connor knows that the current version of the Master is played by an Asian actor? Like, who wants to break it to him?
Albie, in fairness, Brits have voted with their remotes on the woke Doctor Who. I mean, the ratings have been dire. The moment that it went woke, people switched off, Albie. Go woke, go broke. It's the same thing for Doctor Who.
So the moment it went woke is actually more akin to when Peter Hitchens was talking about it in the first GB News clip back in 1963. Like, once again, it depends on your definition of woke. And quite frankly, I don't really consider a series like Doctor Who Series 11 to be woke just because it's got a woman in it. I'd much rather focus on the political leanings of the actual story, like when it licks the boot of Amazon in Kablam, like when the characters just let the fascistic Donald Trump allegory just walk away at the end of Arachnids in the UK, like when they brought back the Daleks in Resolution. In my opinion, a really good story, but politically, there's practically nothing on its mind. But no, Dan and Connor, they just see there's a woman in it, there's a black person in it, therefore woke, therefore bad. That is genuinely where the line is.
I can't speak for the writing during the time that Jodie Whittaker was cast, but I do know that...
Well, ironically, Albie says he's not, like, seen the current era of the show, but he seems to know genuinely more about it than Dan and Connor combined. Like, that's how low the bar is here.
TV ratings have been falling since about 2010, independent of the content that we're seeing on the screens. Look, the simple fact of the matter is Russell T Davies was the writer who relaunched Doctor Who for people in mine and Connor's generation. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do with the television show in 2023. I think it's a bit ridiculous to get this wound up about something which we haven't even seen yet. The BBC's released a press release.
Look at Connor scoffing at the idea of, like, watching something before deciding if it's woke? No, because black people and trans people in the series in and of itself is woke. Remember, this is an extension of what Philip said in the first clip. It does not matter how talented they are, how good they are at their jobs, what the hiring process was. It does not matter. As far as conservatives are concerned, they are a box tick because they can never be good enough.
I repeat, a press release. That is all that's happened, and Connor's got his knickers in a twist. So let's wait and see what the content is, and then perhaps we can have another discussion once we've seen the 60th anniversary series in 2023.
Okay, we will. That was co-founder of Consider.
It's worth also saying, that the historical revisionism...
Dan really wants to wind up the show, but Peter's like, I want to say something here.
Which has gone on. Back in the day, I can tell you that the serials that were least popular were the historical ones. It was the science fiction nonsense that they preferred. They like the monsters and all the rest. The ones that got the poorest audiences, which were much more fun to perform. They were great to do. They didn't get the audiences. It's probably the same thing now. And I think that the programme is technologically very, very brilliant. But I don't like it.
What's Connor pulling that face for? Like, the show, in many respects, has never looked better. The special effects from Double Negative have been superb for the most part, but Connor has probably taken the Bolstrek rule. Nah, black people did the special effects, therefore the show's bad. I think Peter does bring up an interesting point how, across the history of Doctor Who, the historical stories have generally been the more poorer performing ones. Like, generally speaking, you'll get your outliers like Vincent and the Doctor, but generally in terms of fan pollings and fan affection, the historicals generally rank a bit lower than the more sci-fi or the contemporary day ones. It's an interesting outlook, and I kind of agree with him here. I don't quite know why Peter's brought it up in this context, though. Peter seems to be inadvertently trying to rationalise the outlook of someone who just hates black people.
No, it's a very good point. And you know what you're talking about here, Peter Purves, who was, of course, an actor who appeared in 46 episodes of the Doctor Who series.
He appeared in 46 episodes, and you've muted him. Show him some respect. But yeah, in this panel, obviously, the guy who did the best is the one with the right position. It's Albie Amankona, who's the co-founder for Conservatives Against Racism. And honestly, like, I've read some of Albie's writing. He seems like a really smart guy. I do think he's astonishingly naive. I think even just the name of the organisation, Conservatives Against Racism, is, at this point, an objective oxymoron. Like I said, GB News is funded by Conservatives, it's made by Conservatives, it's hosted by Conservatives for a Conservative audience. Like, I'm sorry, but racism is where the Conservative Party line is right now. Like I said, I've read some of Albie's writing in the past, and most of it I think is kind of well-intentioned. He talks about, I prefer the days when the Conservatives were anti-tax rather than anti-woke, which means that Albie probably hates poor people as opposed to Conservatives hating black people. But the objective truth of the matter here, Albie, is that Dan and Connor, whether you like it or not, are the current faces of conservatism in the UK. Like, these are the talking points they want Conservatives to vote on. These are the talking points they want Conservatives to carry in their hearts. Whether or not they genuinely believe it, practically it serves there's like no difference. People like Connor, people like Dan, people like Philip and Michelle in the first clip that we played would genuinely, and this is going to sound harsh, would rather see Albie leaving this country on the back of a boat than be on TV again. And that's the God's honest truth. So, why did I do that? Why did I subject myself, and by proxy you, to that? Because I think it's really important to use outlets like Talk TV, like GB News, to know where the Conservative line is on the media that we want to protect, or the institutions that we want to protect, like BBC and Channel 4, and, you know, the little things like democracy and free speech. But one way to predict UK Conservative talking points is to look at what's happening stateside in America, and what's happening with all of the anti-LGBT legislation here. In response to the casting of Yasmin Finney in Doctor Who, we got this tweet from YouTuber Heel vs Babyface, 18-year-old trans actor in quotes to describe Yasmin Finney, and he says in response, "OK groomer!" exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Basically saying that Yasmin Finney, by virtue of just being trans, means that she is a threat to children, she's a pedophile, she's going to try and manipulate children. All of the implications that come from the word groomer, and Heel vs Babyface knows full well what he's doing. This OK groomer rhetoric that we're seeing gain a foothold politically in the United States is currently making its way over to the United Kingdom as well. Like, the casting of Yasmin Finney, you go on Facebook comment sections, YouTube ones, and you see this OK groomer rhetoric all over the place there. I would say it's only a matter of time before Conservative outlets start using the exact same line, but we already saw them do it in the Talk TV segment, like when Nigel Pawley was responding to the then hypothetical idea of the 13th Doctor and Yas being in a relationship with each other in Legend of the Sea Devils, saying that seeing that on screen was predatory to children.
But now it's they're going to be hiding behind the settee because the Doctor's chasing them in a predatory way.
And this is what the title of the video is all about. Are the BBC prepared to defend Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney from Conservatives like people like Heel vs Babyface, like what we've seen from GB News, where they've just said outright that black people and LGBT people just should not be on TV? Like, are they actually going to take steps to defend these people? Depressingly, last week in America, there was a mass shooting where a white supremacist deliberately went to a black area and shot and killed 10 people and injured many more, because he hated and feared black people so much. And he was radicalised by the same political rhetoric that we're seeing in the UK right now. So my main question is for the BBC, will people like Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney be safe working on Doctor Who in the current Conservative climate? A climate where someone like Yasmin will just be accused of paedophilia, sight unseen, just because she's trans. A climate where millions of Conservatives genuinely believe that the casting of someone like Ncuti Gatwa is a form of violence against them. And if you think something is violent against you, you can justify doing almost anything in response. For the past 5 years, I have depressingly watched Conservatives and tabloids and outright fascists and neo-Nazis online and in tabloids and stuff like that just rip into people like Chris Chibnall, Jodie Whittaker, Mandip Gill, Tosin Cole. They leave Bradley Walsh alone for reasons that, quite frankly, escape me. And I've told this story before. I know an actor who was in Series 11 of Doctor Who was hounded off social media because they were just involved in the current era of the show. And did Chris Chibnall or Jodie Whittaker or the BBC actually step up to the plate to stand up for their talent, stand up for the people who make their programming? Did they fuck? In his interview with Doctor Who magazine, Chris Chibnall said, I like making the show and writing, but the promotion, the press, everything else outside of the writing I don't really care for it. And honestly, you can kind of tell. Hey folks, this is Mr. TARDIS, and I'm an hour into recording this video, and I've just realised that I have been capturing the audio from my webcam instead of the microphone. Every writer does not have to be Kevin Feige. They don't have to be some sort of massive showman or frontman for the show. But I think Doctor Who, especially in this current climate, kind of deserves to have one, and really should have one just for the sake of its talent in this climate. And I honestly think that Russell T Davies will do that. I think he's not afraid to bite back. I think he's not afraid. And I think a reason for that is that his head is on the chopping block here as well. He's an openly gay man, a famously gay man, as was said in a prior video. So I think he understands the implication and the need to combat this rhetoric. And it brings me back to what I was saying earlier about people thinking, oh, combating racism makes you as bad as the racists, which I think is fundamentally stupid. But I've also noticed that the majority of people who say that do tend to be like white cisgendered men, like basically at the top of the hierarchy. People who currently aren't targets for the Conservative government right now, like their anti-LGBT rhetoric is outright genocidal. Their treatment of migrants is so deplorably evil that even the Church of England has called them out. Their response to thousands of people dying from COVID was, let thousands more die, let the bodies pile high in their thousands. Now, I'm not expecting the BBC and Russell T Davies to make a great big statement saying what safeguards and what safety measures they may have in place for Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney, and God forbid anybody else who's part of a marginalised group who happens to be cast in Doctor Who in the next couple of years. But I do sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, hope that there are safeguards for them internally. Even if we don't ever learn about them, I really hope they're there. But I want that in place, not just so I can continue watching the sci-fi show and have the escapism, but because I just want to see Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney excel as best they can in their careers. But I just want to make sure that Ncuti Gatwa and Yasmin Finney can not only just be in the show, but just be safe. Anyway, I'm tired. My flight's in like 10 hours, and I'm gonna have to really try and fix the audio for the first 90% of this video. God, I'm stupid. Or I can try and record while I'm away. I'll maybe improvise something else. I'll see you folks next time.